Hi, everyone. Recently, a big tree at my neighbor's garden fell down by heavy rain and winds, and his roof was broken. Our community support to recover his house. Yes, same thing happens in the world. Big problems need big help. Sometime works, but sometime doesn't work. Today, we will discuss about the global cooperation. Stay tuned, and do not forget to pay or contribute community fees.
All right, so we've got a ton of stuff to get through today, a lot of articles and reports, and it's all about global cooperation.
Or the lack of it.
Yeah, exactly, or the lack of it.
When it comes to the really big challenges that we're all facing.
Right.
You know, climate change, pandemics.
All that stuff.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
You want to figure out, I think, how this all impacts you living in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So, okay, global cooperation.
What is it good for?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so abstract.
It does. It really does.
Like, I don't know, those UN buildings with all the flags.
Right.
And the diplomats.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it has much to do with my life.
Right, exactly. And it's something that people sort of, I think, struggle to grasp.
Okay, so let's try and grasp it.
Okay.
How does global cooperation or lack of global cooperation actually affect, someone living in Southeast Asia?
Well, let's look at an example.
Okay.
Let's say you're working in the garment industry in Vietnam, which is a major hub for, textile manufacturing.
Yeah.
A trade war or a sudden economic downturn
Oh, okay.
in a key export market like the U.S. or Europe
Yeah.
could lead to factories shutting down
Right.
and job losses
Yeah.
right here.
In Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
Okay.
It kind of shows how interconnected everything is.
Yeah. So something happening on the other side of the world can really impact,
Yeah.
my job, my life, my neighborhood.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's these organizations, right?
Yeah.
These international organizations.
With the UN and stuff.
Yeah, but even beyond the UN,
Okay.
there are organizations like the ISO.
The ISO, okay.
Yeah, the International Organization for Standardization.
Yeah.
And they set these, quality benchmarks, safety benchmarks
Yeah.
for how things are made,
Oh, okay.
how things are sold
Right.
globally.
So that affects products that I might buy.
Exactly.
Like here.
Exactly. So those standards
Okay.
can impact, anything from the safety features
Okay.
in your car
Right.
to hygiene protocols
Oh, wow.
at your local food market.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way.
It's all connected.
So these agreements that, happen,
Yeah.
that are made in these places,
Right?
actually have a real impact
They really do.
on me. Yeah.
So to get a clearer picture of where we're at with global cooperation,
Okay.
let's look at this report
Okay.
called the Global Cooperation Barometer 2025.
Global Cooperation Barometer,
Yeah.
2025.
It's put out by the World Economic Forum.
World Economic Forum. Okay.
Yeah, and this barometer essentially
Okay.
takes the temperature
Uh-huh.
of global cooperation across different sectors.
Oh, okay.
And to be honest, the results aren't great.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Okay, what does it say?
So in a nutshell, it shows that global cooperation
Okay.
has basically flatlined.
Flatline
Yeah.
in recent years.
That sounds bad.
It's not good.
Okay, so what's causing this?
Well, I think a major factor is rising geopolitical tensions.
Yeah.
We're seeing this shift
Okay.
from a single superpower to a more,
A multipolar world.
exactly, multipolar world.
Right.
And traditional alliances are kind of fraying.
Yeah.
And there's this growing mistrust between countries.
Right.
And it makes it really hard to find common ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to work together.
But everybody wants to be the top dog.
Right.
Yeah.
And nobody trusts each other.
It's like a recipe for disaster.
It is. And that lack of trust
Okay.
has real consequences.
Okay.
We see it most clearly in the realm of peace and security,
Uh-huh.
where cooperation has really taken a nosedive.
Yeah.
The barometer highlights
Yeah.
a sharp increase
Okay.
in global conflicts,
Right.
which is leading to widespread displacement
Yeah.
and humanitarian crises.
We're seeing that play out. Yeah.
Yeah, in real time.
Exactly. And the human cost is staggering.
Yeah.
Over 473 million children.
Wow.
That's nearly 1 in 5 children worldwide
Jeez.
are living in conflict zones.
That's scary.
It is, and that's the highest number since World War II.
Gosh.
Yeah.
It's hard to see the positives here.
It is.
It's all very doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Are there any areas where we're seeing progress in global cooperation?
There are some, I would say, glimmers of hope.
Okay, I'll take a glimmer.
The report indicates some positive movement in climate and natural capital cooperation.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're seeing increased global investments in renewable energy.
Okay, yeah.
And efforts to reduce carbon emissions.
Right.
This is partly driven
Okay.
by international agreements like the Paris Agreement, where countries have pledged to work together to combat climate change.
So even with all the friction.
The political friction.
Yeah.
There's at least some recognition that
Yeah.
we need to work together on this.
Climate change.
Exactly.
But-
it's a global threat.
Yeah.
No single country can solve it on its own.
Right. Okay, so climate change is a bit of a bright spot.
It is.
Okay.
Another area that's showing promise
Okay.
is digital technology and innovation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Technology kind of transcends borders.
It does.
Yeah.
The report highlights a significant increase in cross-border data flows,
Okay.
intellectual property sharing,
Right.
and even things like student exchange programs.
Oh, yeah.
This type of collaboration
Okay.
fuels knowledge sharing
Yeah.
and innovation,
Right.
which can benefit everybody.
Okay, so it's a bit of a mixed bag then.
Yeah, I would say so.
Some areas are good, some not so good.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us?
It leads to a pretty crucial question.
Okay.
What does the future hold
Yeah.
for global cooperation?
Right.
Is this flatlining a temporary thing?
Yeah.
Or are we entering a new era of, fragmentation and division?
Yeah, that's a really big question.
It is a big question.
With huge implications.
Yeah,
For all of us, really.
it does.
Not just for those,
Right.
world leaders and diplomats in their fancy buildings.
Exactly.
So let's focus on your region for a second.
Okay.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
How does all of this play out here?
So Southeast Asia is interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a unique case study
Okay.
when it comes to global cooperation.
Okay.
You've got this region
Okay.
with diverse histories,
Yeah.
different political systems,
Uh-huh.
varying levels of economic development,
Right.
and different strategic interests,
Yeah.
all navigating this really complex global landscape.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And then you've got ASEAN, which is
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Trying to promote cooperation
exactly.
in the region.
Yeah.
So,
It's a key player
okay.
in promoting economic integration,
Right.
political stability,
Yeah.
and even disaster preparedness in Southeast Asia.
I have to admit, I've heard of ASEAN.
Yeah?
I don't really know what they do.
Okay.
Can you give me a quick rundown?
Yeah, sure.
Like, what are their initiatives
Okay.
and what impact do they have?
So one of their most impactful initiatives is the ASEAN Free Trade Area.
Okay.
And this has significantly boosted trade within the region.
Okay.
It's lowered tariffs.
Right.
And it's made it easier for businesses to operate across borders.
Okay, great.
Another important example is the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response,
Okay.
which is known as ADMER.
ADMER. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds important.
Yeah, so Southeast Asia is highly vulnerable
Yep.
to natural disasters.
Right. Earthquakes, tsunamis,
Exactly.
you name it.
Floods, volcanic eruptions, everything.
Yeah, we've got it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ADMER establishes a framework
Yeah.
for ASEAN member states to collaborate
Okay.
on disaster preparedness and response.
So like sharing resources,
Exactly.
coordinating rescue efforts,
Yeah.
providing humanitarian assistance.
All of that.
Okay, so it's about having each other's backs
Exactly.
when disaster strikes.
Right. It's a recognition that
Yeah.
when these large-scale challenges happen,
Yeah.
you need regional cooperation
Yeah.
to deal with them effectively.
Okay, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
ASEAN's not perfect, right?
It's not a cure-all.
It has limitations.
It does.
Okay. What are some of the hurdles that ASEAN faces
Yeah.
in trying to achieve its goals?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is managing the diversity of its member states.
Yeah. Okay.
You've got countries
Okay.
at very different stages of economic development
Uh-huh.
with different political systems
Yeah.
and different strategic priorities. Reaching a consensus on any issue can be a very delicate process.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
10 countries with very different, agendas.
And then you've got the challenge of navigating the intensifying geopolitical rivalries.
Yeah, right.
Particularly between the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
This region is becoming a focal point for competition between these major powers.
Yeah.
And that puts ASEAN in a very delicate position.
So they're trying to walk this tightrope.
Exactly.
Between, internal differences and these external pressures.
Exactly.
While at the same time trying to address all these transnational challenges.
Right.
Like climate change.
Cybersecurity
threats.
All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complex balancing act.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, but one that ASEAN has been relatively successful at.
So far.
Okay,
that's interesting. So while global cooperation might be flatlining on the global stage, it seems like Southeast Asia, through ASEAN, is at least trying to buck the trend.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, but it's not a guaranteed success.
Well, exactly. ASEAN's success is not guaranteed.
Right.
The organization faces real challenges.
Okay.
And the future of regional cooperation really depends on how effectively it can adapt to this changing global landscape.
Okay. I'm definitely eager to learn more about these challenges and what the future holds for ASEAN.
Yeah.
But I think we need to take a minute to digest everything we've just talked about.
Okay.
So we'll be back in a bit to continue our deep dive into global cooperation.
Sounds good. So we were talking about ASEAN before the break
and
how it's trying to make cooperation happen.
Right, in Southeast Asia.
Right.
With all these different countries.
Exactly. And it's worked in some ways,
Yeah, it seems like it.
But we've got to be realistic about the limitations, about the tensions.
Right.
It's not perfect by any means.
Okay, so let's talk about those limitations then.
Okay.
What are some of the things that make it hard for ASEAN?
Well, one of the biggest things is just the fact that the member states are so different.
Okay.
I mean, you have countries with totally different economies, different levels of development, different political systems, different goals, different priorities.
Right.
So getting all 10 of them to agree on anything, it can be really tough.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like herding cats.
Exactly.
How do they even manage to function with all these different voices?
Well, it's a lot of negotiation and compromise.
Right.
They have this principle of consensus.
Okay.
Which means that all 10 countries have to agree before anything gets done.
Right.
So you can imagine how that can slow things down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sometimes I'm sure good ideas just get watered down.
Right, because they're trying to please everybody.
Yeah.
That definitely happens.
Okay.
But this consensus approach also has some advantages.
Okay, how so?
Well, for one thing, it makes sure that everyone has a say.
Okay. That's fair.
It's not just one powerful country dictating to everyone else.
Right.
It's a collective decision.
Yeah.
And that can help build trust.
Okay, so it's a trade-off then.
Yeah, I would say so.
Maybe slower progress, but at least everyone's on board.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
The other big challenge for ASEAN is the geopolitical landscape.
Oh, right, with the U.S. and China.
Right, exactly.
Because everyone wants to be friends with both.
Right, and nobody wants to pick sides.
Yeah.
So ASEAN is constantly trying to balance those relationships.
Okay.
Without getting caught in the middle of a power struggle.
Right, like walking a tightrope.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do they even manage that and deal with all these other issues, like climate change and cybersecurity and everything else?
Well, they've developed these frameworks and initiatives.
Okay.
For example, they have something called the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific.
The Indo-Pacific.
Yes.
That seems to be the buzzword these days.
It is, and it just reflects how important that whole region is becoming.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, the Western Pacific, and ASEAN's outlook emphasizes dialogue, cooperation, inclusivity.
Right. So everyone working together.
Exactly. Even if there are these big rivalries happening at the same time.
Right. Finding some kind of common ground.
Exactly.
Okay. So what about the economic side of things?
Right. Well, they have initiatives for that, too.
Like what?
Well, they have the ASEAN Economic Community, which was established back in 2015.
Okay.
And the goal is to create a single market, a single production base for the whole region.
Wow.
So that goods, services, investments, skilled labor can all move freely.
That sounds really ambitious.
It is, but they've made some progress.
Like what?
Well, for example, most tariffs within the region have been eliminated.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there are measures to facilitate cross-border investment.
Okay, so it's moving in the right direction.
It is.
Towards this kind of integration.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the other stuff we were talking about? Like climate change and cybersecurity.
Right. Well, they have specific initiatives for those too.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, for the haze problem, they have the ASEAN Agreement on transboundary haze pollution
Okay.
that's aimed at tackling those forest fires.
Right, the ones that cause all that smoke.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And for cybersecurity, they have the ASEAN Cybersecurity Cooperation Strategy.
So they've got plans in place.
They do.
But are these things actually working?
Well, that's always the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Implementation.
Right, because we still see the haze.
We do.
And we still hear about cyber attacks all the time.
Right, and these are complicated problems.
Yeah.
There are no quick fixes.
Right.
But at least ASEAN is trying to address them.
Okay.
And the member states are committed to working together.
So it's a step in the right direction.
It is, even if it's a slow process.
Baby steps.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
And you know, it's interesting. This commitment to regional cooperation, it's actually pretty unique to Southeast Asia.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of other parts of the world.
Okay.
Countries are much more focused on their own interests.
Right.
Even if it means, competing with their neighbors.
Okay.
But in Southeast Asia, there's this genuine desire to work together.
Interesting.
Even if it's messy and imperfect.
Okay, so there's something special about this region then,
I think there is.
in terms of how they approach cooperation.
Yes, and I think it's something the rest of the world could learn from.
Okay, so you're saying this Asian way
Right.
could actually be a model for other parts of the world.
It's possible.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying it's a one-size-fits-all solution.
Well,
Every region is different.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some principles and practices from the Asian way that could be adapted.
Okay, like what specifically, what makes this approach so unique?
Well, one of the key things is the emphasis on consensus. It's not about powerful countries dictating the terms. It's about finding common ground through dialogue and consultation.
So everyone gets a seat at the table.
Exactly.
And they try to find solutions that work for everyone.
Right, even if it takes longer.
Okay, I see.
Another crucial element is inclusivity.
Okay.
ASEAN has this strict policy of non-interference in the internal affairs of its members.
Right, so each country gets to do its own thing.
Exactly. So you can have countries with very different political systems coexisting and cooperating within the same organization.
That's pretty different from how some other organizations work.
It is.
Okay.
And I think that's a big reason why ASEAN has been successful in keeping the peace in the region.
So it's about respecting diversity, not trying to eliminate it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And that's a lesson that other regions could learn from.
Okay.
Instead of seeing differences as obstacles, you can see them as opportunities for innovation and creativity.
That's a good point.
So, the world is facing some really big challenges right now.
It is.
Climate change, pandemics, economic instability.
Yeah.
Do you think this ASEAN way can really make a difference on a global scale?
That's a big question.
It is, and I don't have a definitive answer.
Okay.
But I do think that the principles and practices of ASEAN provide a good framework for thinking about these challenges.
Okay, but how do we go from regional cooperation to global cooperation?
Right, well, we can't just create a giant ASEAN for the whole world.
Right.
But we can look at how to strengthen the institutions we already have.
Okay.
Like the United Nations.
Okay.
We can also think about how to get different regional organizations to work together more closely.
Okay.
Like ASEAN, the African Union, the European Union.
So it's more about building networks of cooperation.
Exactly.
Rather than trying to create one massive entity.
Right. And it's about understanding that global cooperation doesn't require everyone to be the same.
Okay.
It's about finding ways to work together while respecting diversity and acknowledging different perspectives. So it's a complex process.
It sounds like it.
But it's one that we have to engage in.
I agree, but it seems so daunting.
It is.
Especially with everything going on in the world right now.
It's a huge challenge.
It feels almost impossible to get countries to cooperate on a global level.
I understand that.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say impossible.
Okay.
And honestly, we don't really have a choice.
Right.
The problems we're facing are just too big, too interconnected.
I get it.
For any one country to solve on its own.
We got to do something.
We do.
But where do we even begin?
Well, we can start by focusing on areas where cooperation is already working.
Okay.
Like climate change mitigation.
Right.
And digital technology collaboration.
So start with the successes.
Exactly. And build from there.
Okay.
We also need to focus on building trust between countries.
Right.
And that means engaging in dialogue.
Okay.
Finding common ground. seeking out opportunities to collaborate,
Okay.
even on a small scale.
So baby steps.
Exactly, just one brick at a time.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And it's important to remember that this isn't just about governments
Right.
or international organizations.
Right.
This is something we can all contribute to.
Really?
Yes, in our own ways.
How so? What can individuals do to make a difference in something this big?
Well, we can start by educating ourselves
Okay.
about global issues
Right.
and understanding why cooperation is so important.
Okay.
We can support organizations that are working to promote collaboration,
Right.
and we can make an effort to connect with people from different cultures and backgrounds, because ultimately global cooperation is about relationships,
Okay.
and it's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's not just about abstract ideas and policies.
Right.
It's about people connecting with each other.
I like that. It's a good reminder that we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Even when it doesn't feel like it.
That's right.
I'm feeling a bit more optimistic now,
Good.
but also realizing there's a lot of work to do.
There is.
It's going to take a real effort from all of us
It
to
will.
make a difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
and I think it's time to move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll bring all of this back to you, the listener,
Okay.
and see how global cooperation directly affects your life here in Southeast Asia.
Welcome back. So we've been talking about all these big ideas, right?
Yeah, global cooperation, all that.
Exactly. But before we wrap things up,
Yeah,
I want to make sure we connect it back to you.
the listener.
Yeah, the listener, because it's easy to get lost in the big picture and forget how this stuff actually affects individuals.
So let's bring it down to earth a bit.
Yeah.
Talk about some real-world examples.
Exactly. And I think it makes sense to focus on Southeast Asia since that's where you are.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with something concrete.
Okay.
Something tangible.
Okay, I like it.
The Asian Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response.
Oh, yeah, AIDMER.
AIDMER, exactly.
I remember that from earlier.
So as you know,
Yeah,
Southeast Asia is a disaster-prone region.
we get it all.
Earthquakes, tsunamis,
Volcanoes.
floods, everything.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
And the impact of those disasters can be just devastating,
Absolutely.
both in terms of human life and economic damage.
I still remember the 2004 tsunami.
Right.
Those images are just seared into my memory.
Yeah, it was a horrific event, and it really highlighted the need for regional cooperation.
To be better prepared.
Exactly, to be better prepared and to respond more effectively when these things happen. And that's where AIDMER comes in.
Okay.
It's an agreement that was signed back in 2005,
Okay.
and it provides this framework
Okay.
for Asian countries to work together on disaster management.
So pooling resources.
Hmm.
Sharing information.
Exactly.
Learning from each other's experiences.
Precisely. So they've created this regional stockpile of emergency supplies.
Oh, wow.
They've developed early warning systems for tsunamis and other events.
Okay.
They've got specialized disaster response personnel who are trained to work together.
Okay.
So if a disaster hits one country...
The others can jump in and help?
Exactly. And we've seen this happen many times.
Like when?
Well, for example, after Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines in 2013, other ASEAN countries provided immediate assistance.
Yeah.
Search and rescue teams, medical supplies, financial aid.
Oh, wow. So it really does work in practice.
It does. It's a great example of how regional cooperation can make a tangible difference.
I'm curious, how does this coordination work on the ground?
Well, it's not like there's this big central command center.
Okay.
It's more of a flexible framework.
Okay.
It sets these guidelines and mechanisms for cooperation, but it allows for flexibility.
Okay.
Each country has its own disaster management agency, and they coordinate through a network of contact points.
So it's more decentralized.
Right. It's about each country taking ownership and working together,
Okay.
rather than having some central authority calling all the shots.
That makes sense. So AIDMER is one example. What are some others?
Well, public health is another area where we're seeing a lot of cooperation.
Especially after COVID, right?
Exactly. The pandemic was a wake-up call.
Yeah, for sure.
It showed us how interconnected we are
Yeah.
and how important global health security is.
Right. And while there were some challenges during COVID, I think it also showed the potential of regional cooperation.
Absolutely.
So how did Asian countries work together during the pandemic?
Well, early on, when there was so much uncertainty,
Yeah.
They quickly established channels to share information.
Okay.
They coordinated their responses.
Okay.
They developed regional guidelines for travel restrictions, testing protocols, quarantine measures.
So they tried to present a united front.
Exactly, which was really important to avoid confusion and chaos. And I think that level of coordination was really helpful in slowing the spread of the virus.
Okay.
And mitigating the impact of the pandemic in the region.
So it shows that having those systems in place
Right.
is crucial.
Yeah, because we know there will be other health crises in the future.
Yeah.
And we need to be prepared.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've talked about disaster preparedness and public health. What about the economic side of things?
Right. Well, global cooperation also plays a big role in the economy.
Okay.
And one of the most significant developments in recent years has been the rise of regional trade agreements.
Yeah.
Like the ASEAN Free Trade Area.
Right.
But even bigger than that.
Okay.
Is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
RCEP.
RCEP, exactly.
I've heard a lot about that.
It's a big deal. It's the world's largest free trade agreement.
Wow.
It covers all 10 ASEAN countries.
Okay.
Plus China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand.
So a huge chunk of the global economy.
Exactly. And basically, it reduces tariffs and other barriers to trade,
Right.
which makes it easier and cheaper for businesses to export their goods and services.
Okay.
And that can lead to lower prices for consumers.
Okay, so it's all about creating this more open and integrated market.
Exactly. And this is expected to boost economic growth.
Okay.
And create jobs across the region.
Great.
RCEP also has rules about intellectual property rights, e-commerce, competition policy.
Quick.
All of this is aimed at creating a level playing field
Okay.
for businesses.
So it's not just about reducing trade barriers. It's about making sure everyone plays by the same rules.
Right. And this is especially helpful for small and medium-sized enterprises.
Okay.
Because it makes it easier for them to participate in regional trade.
Okay. But are there any downsides to this kind of integration?
Well, there's always the concern about increased competition,
Right.
which can be tough for local businesses.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is that globalization is here to stay, and Southeast Asia needs to be part of it.
So it's about adapting and finding ways to thrive in this interconnected world.
Precisely. And this all goes back to the idea that cooperation is essential
Yeah.
for navigating the complexities of globalization.
Right. And making sure that everyone benefits.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to wrap up our discussion.
Okay.
Global cooperation is more crucial than ever.
Yeah.
These challenges we face, climate change, pandemics, economic instability,
The list goes on.
no one country can solve these things alone.
We need each other.
Exactly. And I think ASEAN shows us
Yeah.
how countries can come together to address these shared challenges
Right.
and build a better future.
So it's not just the responsibility of governments.
Right.
It's something we can all contribute to.
Exactly. Whether it's educating ourselves, supporting organizations that are working on these issues, or just making an effort to connect with people from different cultures.
I like that. Global cooperation starts with each of us. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Hopefully our listeners have a better understanding of global cooperation,
Yeah.
the challenges, the opportunities, and the importance of working together.
It's not always easy, but it's essential.
The future really is in our hands.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into global cooperation.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.